We're good to go, Beck? Everybody, good volumes, everything? Kerry, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. We just got done talking to Ben Dubin, as you know. You saw him and walk by you. So, mental health in the fire service, stigmas associated with it, culture associated with it, and the real reality of what firefighters see, the traumatic things that they see. Maybe don't have enough time to process what they've seen before they gotta go run on the next call. What's going on with mental health right now? And I understand you have an organization that is helping first responders and firefighters navigate mental health issues and crises and things like that. So get us up to speed on you, what you're doing for the fire department, and how you're helping.
Well, so currently I have a business called Public Safety Crisis Solutions. I started that back in 2014, and that actually started after I was in a position where I was tasked with trying to help all of the family members of the Granite Mountain 19 hotshot tragedy
Oosh.
be able to utilize services. So I actually started that the business through my efforts working with the 100 Club and the charities trying to be able to place family members with different services nationwide because they didn't all live here, the extended family members. So that's actually when I kind of started my business. That was while I was still working for Phoenix Fire. So I retired from Phoenix Fire in 2016 and then started offering member services and counseling services, consulting services throughout the state of Arizona. So I have contracts with different fire departments, different unions throughout the state providing services. And then because of the Granite Mountain Hotshot incident, I also got connected to the IFF back in DC. So I'm a behavioral health consultant for them. And so for them, I develop curriculum and work on legislative efforts. And I am an instructor for them. So I go around nationwide teaching for them. And then I also go on deployments for them. So anytime there's some type of a major incident, they might send myself or a few other contracted behavioral health specialists to go and help peers on different incidents. So it's kind of, all over the place what I do, but I love what I do. So I started, obviously, my career as a 911 operator, a radio dispatcher, and then I ran the crisis response program for Phoenix Fire for many years too, so helping the community. And then we just noticed that we needed to spend more time and effort on working with our own members
Yeah.
because we were kind of taking better care of the community than we were taking care of ourselves. So we started taking, more assertive action on trying to develop our own programs. So that's kind of where I started, shifting gears and doing more stuff for the members. My husband is a retired firefighter. My sister's a retired fire dispatcher. So, I've just grown up, in public safety. My grandfather and uncle were firefighters. So, this is my passion, really. I was going to just go teach at ASU, and they convinced me to keep working. So I'm still working.
And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that. What's unique to firefighters? What obviously they see and experience things that are different than most folks see or experience maybe in a year or even in a lifetime. How does that unique set of circumstances contribute to the mental health challenges?
Right. So there's a lot of research out now that really has tried to help us put some of those pieces of the puzzle together. Right. And what I would say is in the last 10 years, I mean, we've made huge strides in the mental health culture, right? As far as, just general public, but in the fire service as well, right? Like, I feel like we've talked about the fact that stigma is huge, but I really feel like we've started making a difference, at least in the departments that have, good active programs, right? So there's some departments out there, when I travel around that don't have what other departments have, right? So there still is, definitely, not parity, right, in all levels of organizations as far as how much services they have to offer. What I'll say is, like what you mentioned, what the research has shown is that in the general public, a person might experience 3 traumatic type incidents in their lifetime. Well, a firefighter could experience 3 traumatic incidents in one
Yeah,
shift,
before lunch.
right? So if you really, for me, that was, I think, been really helpful to teach, when firefighters are like, I don't understand, like, why am I being affected all of a sudden? Well, it's not all of a sudden, it's cumulative, right? And the other side of it is that when we're trying to treat you for whatever, if once you do finally decide to go to treatment, right, and try to get help because you're having thoughts or feelings or behaviors that you don't want, um, then we're also trying to treat you while you're still working. So you're still getting exposed and you're still
Yeah,
suffering traumas like while we're trying to treat you, right? So
yeah,
that's some of the research that we know why it affects firefighters more significantly or first responders in general. The other thing is that we also know one of the things that really helps someone process trauma is that we process trauma when we sleep. So now, if you think about the fact that one of the major things that firefighters have an issue with
sleep
is sleep
deprivation. Holy
deprivation,
cow.
then that is one of the things that we also feel is a huge catalyst as to why we get that cumulative effect and why we have a harder time processing things, especially as the years go on, right? So as years of service progress, because typically your sleep problems start just at the station in the beginning, and then about 10, 15 years on is when you start having more problems at home with the
Hmm.
sleep as well. So between that and not actually, taking that approach of why don't I go to counseling throughout my career and
Yeah,
clean things up, right? And
yeah,
process things as we go through them instead of waiting for there to be a problem.
yeah,
So, kind of like cancer, right? Like you guys
yeah,
are trying to screen for cancer, take care of it before you start
yeah,
to get the symptoms.
yeah.
Same thing for mental health, right? So sometimes
Interesting.
we're not taking care of them till they already have it,
Yeah,
which is harder to treat.
sure. Then you have a whole lifetime of uh, you've got everything up to that day to unpack
Yes.
and fit, but if they had the
Yeah.
tools or the right mindset
Right.
earlier on, so how do you approach that? How do you um, um, help the fire service evolve and mental health is always a challenging thing. No firefighter I've ever met wants to appear weak. They want to appear capable, and I've got this, and that didn't bother me. But how do you break through?
So I think that I mean, like, obviously training and education is the most important thing, right? Bringing in peer support concept to departments really has helped change the dynamic and the stigma because we now have firefighters talking to other firefighters and saying, hey, I was messed up, or hey, this affected me, or hey, how can I help you? I've been there, I've been on this road with you, right? That's made a huge difference. They're my link, they're my liaison, right? Sometimes they're the ones that are able to take care of things and it never even gets to me, but they're also my eyes and ears out there, but we also need it to not just be the peers, right? We need it to
Yeah,
be everyone in the fire service. So we're really trying to work a lot on education on that. I think the other side of it is I think we kind of now talk about the fact that people that are willing to tackle this, tackle their mental health, to create a better mindset, to put time and energy into their mental performance just as much as their physical performance,
right.
right? That's a shift,
Yeah,
right?
they'll
And that,
spend an hour and a half a day in the gym, but
yeah,
they won't spend an hour and a half
yeah,
doing breathing
right.
or meditation or other things that could be beneficial
So
to
we're
them.
starting that like in Phoenix, in Tempe, some of the departments that I work with, we're starting some of that now early on, right? Like earlier today, first day of the academy. Now for the last 3 years, I get the recruits on day one of the academy and I teach them about mental performance and mindset. And I teach them
Love it.
about how to visualize and how to meditate and how to breathe and
Awesome.
how to practice, how to be positive, how to not, psych themselves out, right? And we actually talk about the fact that everyone has anxiety. And, how did that feel just driving to the academy this morning, right? That's anxiety. So when you
Yeah,
start to feel that, how are you going to tackle it? So we're starting that on day one now, which has made a huge
I
difference.
bet.
And then we talk about resources. We do suicide awareness training. And then in their just towards their last year, then we start putting in stuff about resilience. Okay, now how do you take care of yourself for the rest of your career? Now that you've been out there, you've seen some things, you've experienced some things, you can see that not everybody you're working with in the station is as healthy as they should be,
Yeah.
mentally or physically. So, how are you going to prevent yourself from being like that?
Yeah.
Right. So, I think a lot of it is training and education is a part of it. And just, that willingness. I do get, a lot of firefighters now. We have increased our utilization rate. From the standard EAP utilization rate is usually 4%, maybe, for our general public. Most of the departments that I work with, we have between a 20 and 30% utilization rate for just EAP services, which is just your normal counseling for normal everyday stressors and struggles and for your family members. Then we also have legislative acts that the fire service has been working on where we're now saying, hey, let's not wait till someone gets PTSD. Let's treat
Yeah.
them after they've had a significant incident. We've dialed in what is a significant incident, and you automatically qualify for 36 sessions of counseling if you want to utilize that benefit. And if it's a benefit, why wouldn't you want to use it?
Yeah.
Right? So trying to just shift that mentality of like, you're owed this, you
Yeah.
deserve this, you should use this. It's a benefit, right? Just like screenings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I might be asking a terrible question to put us in a bad spot. I think one of the stigmas ends up being, certainly in our culture, is if you ask for help, like that somehow that's the end of the line. But what I've experienced in talking to people is how many people truly make it back. They're able to get help, and then you go back to your normal life. And I think to me, in my experience that I've had in talking with people, is that no, you can actually access these resources when you don't know why you can't put a finger on it. You talked about anxiety, you can't put a finger on depression or whatever it is that you're feeling, and then you can go get help for that, even if you don't know what it's called.
Right.
And then you can go back to your normal life, and guess what? It's better. You don't have to deal with those things. How many people are you dealing with of us? And I'm sure it's an overgeneralization, but what's the percentage? I mean, are more people than not actually getting the treatment and then going back to their regular life, or how long is like treatment lasting, or what are you seeing with that?
So, I mean, I say that, it is kind of like, all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But as far as members that actually end up not being able to continue to work, I mean, next to nothing,
Yeah.
right? Compared to those that get treated and are still working that never even come off the truck. Nobody ever even knows that they're getting counseling, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I've had maybe a handful of firefighters, in the last 10 years that have ended up with a medical retirement or, leaving the job, right? But those are more choices. And a lot of times there's physical stuff that goes along with that, right? So it's not just mental. It's not just PTSD. Sometimes there's other things that are involved in that situation. So, I mean, for the most part, you were talking about, not even 1% maybe of people that don't,
And that's
continue.
and
Yeah.
because when I talked to Patrick about it, and he's like, I want to better understand this mental health stuff. I was like, well, step one is talking to Kerry, because she's our
He said that.
like
We need to
that.
talk to Kerry.
There's no one else worth talking to, because she's the foundation of everything that we're doing. And just in my experience, and I certainly don't know everybody, that's been the barrier, is this unknown of like, okay, if I access resources, then what happens to me? Like, it'd be awesome to be able to kind of tear down those barriers. We talked to Ben Dubin about it. If you could tell somebody like, hey, I bet you feel like you're happy, but what if I told you could feel better? Would you do that? What if I told you could avoid crisis? Would you do that? Well, yeah, I think the obvious answer is yes. So I don't know how we do that. I do feel like the culture is changing. I don't know if you've seen that. You've been at it for a long time now, but I do feel like people are much more comfortable in asking for resources. But
Is that true, Kerry?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the culture has changed some, right? Like, I think one, just generationally, I think the younger generation coming in is more accepting
Okay.
of mental health services and wellness in general, and using benefits, right? So I think some of that is generational. So and then I think we're teaching about it earlier on. So I think then they're like, okay, I can do this. This is no big deal, right? I think we still have a little bit of, stuff as far as, those with years of service on, right? Where they're still in that old school mentality where it is a little bit difficult, or why bother now, or is it really going to make a difference, or not understanding that they think it's just the way it is. How is going and talking to somebody going to fix anything? How is it going to change anything, right? And I'll always be like, well, whatever you're doing right now is not working,
Yeah.
so why
Yeah,
not try
right,
Yeah.
something else, right?
right.
Yeah.
How do most people get plugged in with you and with your services? What's the most common way?
So I think the peers are a huge part of it, right? Like I really feel like a lot of times the peers drive it. I think we have helped in that there are open discussions. There's now discussions in fire stations of people like, oh yeah, I went to counseling, or hey, I have a counseling appointment
Nice.
today, or hey, I take this medication, or hey, I've tried this. Have you guys done, have you used a brain tap? Have you used an alpha stem? I think that there is more discussion about it now. So I think that drives it, right? I get a lot of phone calls from people saying, hey, so and so told me to call you. We do a lot of more outreach now, too. So some of our programming is that if we know of certain stressful incidents that members have gone on, we have peers reach out to them on the day after shift or sometimes on shift to just check on them, right? And then we remind them of their services and their benefits and their resources. So it's like it's just becoming more of a way of the culture now. So I think because of that, people are a little bit more. I will say I do have a lot of retirees that are reaching out, and
Hmm.
they're like, I wish I would have done this a long time ago, right? So they're kind of
So
waiting till they
retirees that are
retire.
having current problems, maybe
Yeah,
with a spouse or
yeah.
whatever, and it's all rooted in unresolved fire
Right.
service
And it's a
moments.
huge transition, right? All of a sudden your whole world has changed when you retire. So your connection has changed, your supports have changed, your schedule has changed, who you are,
Yeah, the
sometimes
camaraderie's
has
gone,
changed.
the whole
Your
firefighter
family
station culture. Yeah,
dynamics and situation, like, so everything has
yeah,
changed. And then after about, 6 weeks, it's not a vacation anymore. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, now what?
yeah.
Like now I can't sleep, or I'm watching TV and I'm crying, and I can't regulate my emotions and what's happening. And what we have found is that your uniform sometimes almost is like this shield or this barrier, right? So when you put your uniform on, you're almost putting on like this disconnect. And so you do that to be able to do your job. Because if you felt all the pain and suffering that you saw on a daily basis, you wouldn't be able to do your job, right? So you kind of
Yeah,
learn this disconnect. Well, now all of a sudden, when you don't have to put that uniform on every third day or more often, all of a sudden that shield goes down. And
yeah.
so now things start affecting you differently, and you start feeling.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And it's also interesting that when you were saying that the younger folks are more open minded about mental health, and it seems like that to me in general. It's the old timers and the guys my age.
I think it's cultural. It's just what you grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
yeah, so I think that's definitely, like you said, it's being taught on day one, and then things start to happen, and it kind of forces it on you. You have no choice but to seek help. So yeah, I think it's been really helpful.
paint me a picture of 10 years from now. What do you hope for the fire service? What do you hope guys are doing, or the guys and girls are doing for mental health?
I
What do you
hope
want to
I'm
see?
retired, but
Well, no, but I'm just saying,
So you're
like,
seeing it from afar.
what kind of change
yeah.
do you hope to see? Certainly by then.
Well, I mean, some of it is really simple stuff that I'm hoping happens sooner versus later. But I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about and fighting for years that still isn't official is that we actually don't have a yearly mental health assessment that is mandated.
Hmm.
I mean, that seems ridiculous to
Yeah.
me, right? Like, why would we not put our members in front of a mental health provider at least one time every year
Yeah.
to talk to them, to coach them, to assess them, to
Even
see
just say,
how you're
"How are you
changing?
doing?"
Yeah,
and watch them just burst into tears and something. You're like,
right.
"Okay, we need to help you."
And even if someone is getting counseling, it's still different, right? An assessment is different because we're actually, the program that we've developed that we're trying to start in some of our departments is that we give you like 14 different assessments. And then we can watch from year to year how those change because we don't always see it, right? It's no
Yeah.
different than the scale. If we don't get on the scale every week, all of a sudden a year later, we're like, whew, what
What
happened?
happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the same
Who's
thing
that
can
guy?
I need a new
happen
scale.
to, exactly, it's the scale's fault. But the same thing happens with mental health, right? And if we can catch the compassion fatigue or the burnout or the anxiety before it gets too bad, we have the ability to affect more change and to be healthier. Instead of treating a diagnosis, we're now treating somebody, for symptoms instead of the diagnosis. So I think that would be the huge thing for me. NFPA is trying to get that into the new revision that they're doing, but it's still, how do you roll that out? How do you do it? It's not just your physician saying, hey, how are you sleeping? Do you feel sad? Are you drinking too much? Right? Like, it's more than that. So I think that will be a huge thing that could make a difference, right? And then other than that, I think that, we need to, just like we have prioritized physical, right, with PT time and stuff like that, I think we just have to keep driving some of those other things and make them be more permanent. There's no reason why we shouldn't be teaching meditation to recruits. There's no reason we shouldn't be, having more of these things, right? The ice baths or the yoga or,
Breath work.
some of these things that are done, as a routine. It's not, oh, maybe. It's, yeah, no, we do these things. We do them, every shift we do them. Those would be the things that, from a resilience perspective, makes a difference, right? Obviously, that all kind of correlates with, we really do need to maybe in some ways find some restrictions, right? I can tell you that I can tell who's doing their best three. And I don't know if you've heard about the best three, right? But when our guys are getting ready to retire and they want to work as much as they can work, that is like the worst thing that was ever invented, right? Because everything falls apart for them during those 3 years of working all the time. They're not getting a break. They're not recovering. They're not at home. So then stuff's not going well at home either. That, and I think for the newer generation, has kind of gone away, right?
Yeah, it's a whole different setup,
It's
which
a
is a
different,
bigger conversation
and I was
about.
like, you know what? Like, I'm probably the minority here, but like that, if that went away, that would be the best thing ever. And that overtime is actually restricted, like there's a reason that, shift work was created for the fire service, right? And you needed some breaks in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say to a firefighter right now who's maybe struggling a bit and is on the fence about seeking help? What would you say to that guy right now?
So, I mean, I guess the stigma is, well, how is it going to help me, right? And so what I would say is, no different than going to a coach, right? When you're training for something, they see things you don't see. They think of things you don't think of. So it's just getting a different perspective. It's not scary. It's not, nobody's going to lock you up. Nobody's going to, I mean, you're a part of this. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. They help you figure out what to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's all different kinds of therapy. There's like I always tell everyone, you don't want the treatment for cancer 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You want the treatment for cancer today.
Yeah.
Same thing with mental health. Mental health has come so far in the last 10 years. We have some new modalities that are amazing. Brain spotting. If we did brain spotting on everyone after significant incidents, then they wouldn't have an issue later on. There's ways we can clear out the physiological response, and then our body's not holding that trauma year and year and
I'm
year.
sorry. What the heck is brain spotting?
Oh, come on, Patrick. Can you tell him what brain spotting is?
Oh, come on. You don't know either.
So it's just another one of these modalities, right?
Okay.
But what we have found is that we actually can, when it says like your the to be able to see into your soul, right? It's through your eyes. And then we know our body holds trauma, and we're able to be able to see with someone just in their field of vision, where they look, how they gaze, when we talk to them or have them think about something, that it actually releases the physiological response and the trauma, and it makes it go away.
Wow.
And so then it's not jamming up all those brain waves in your brain that become what we call triggers, right? That things start firing off of.
Yeah.
Because we're keeping them clean. We're keeping, just like keeping your arteries clean in your bloodstream.
What are,
Amazing.
what are some one of the things that I talked to you about recently was I had a shoulder surgery and I wasn't able to get back into the physical routine I had as far as training and doing different things. And mine's not even anything crazy, but you said, hey, you got to keep an eye on yourself and these things, and your brain's probably not acting right. I was like, she's actually right. Like, what are some other things? Obviously, we have physical injuries where people may not. I think there's some obvious life events that happen where people have been like, man, I should probably check myself right now. But what are some other things that you've noticed happening to people? I mean, you talked to me, I don't know if you can go in depth or if it's that simple, but about like physical injuries that you have that don't allow you to have your physical routine that ultimately affect your mental health. Is there other things that you're seeing with firefighters that they experience where you're like, anyone who's listening, all 4 people or whoever gets into this thing, hey, if this is happening in your life, you should probably do a little inventory, like, and give some thought to, is everything going on right up here? Is there any correlation with some things?
Well, so one of the things that we know is that for firefighters, a lot of times their self-care. If I were to say, what's your self-care? It's all physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then all of a sudden you get hurt, and now everything you've done for self-care, you can't do anymore,
That
right?
makes
You
sense.
can't
Yeah.
hike, you can't
Yeah.
swim, you can't, work
Yeah.
out, you can't, like all those activities, right, that you would do for some, some self-care,
Yeah.
like all of a sudden now you can't do them. So one of the things we talk about is how do you figure out how to do other types of self-care throughout your career so that you do have some diversity there, right?
Interesting.
Using music, using some of these, meditation, using,
Yeah.
reading, cooking, whatever that is, right? But understanding that you have to have, many forms of self-care because you never know what's going to be limiting you, right? Like if you have an eye injury, if you have a hand or a foot injury or, whatever it is, right? Like, is it going to take away your ability to play your guitar? And that's what you did for self-care.
Makes sense.
So how do we think more in depth about that and actually having a plan? So why, we need to have a plan. So just like with a diet, right? Like you can say, oh, I want to eat healthy. But if you don't actually have a plan and you don't prep for it, then it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
So for mental health, the same thing. What is my plan? So if I'm stressed, if I'm not doing well, if I'm having a bad day, what is my plan? And do I have it written down so I don't have to think about it, in the middle of it, in the middle of my crisis? And then obviously just other stuff, right? Like you guys are trying to be a firefighter while you're living life. If you have a family member that's sick, or if you have a family member in hospice, or you have someone that's been given a terminal diagnosis, and now you're going on calls that are similar to that, how are you going to take care of yourself during that time? Because those calls are going to start affecting you differently.
Yeah.
Just like once you've had a child, calls affect you differently on the job. We need to start planning for that so it doesn't, catch us by surprise, so that we understand, okay, now there's a difference. I got to do something different for me, like to be able to take care of myself because of that.
Gotcha. His wheels will continue to turn, but I know he's obviously
They're
been
turning. Do you hear it?
deep in the.
Do you
Oh
hear it
yeah,
through
for
the
sure. In
microphone?
the
It's like this rusty kind of gear sound.
It's getting there. But he's been so submerged in the cancer stuff. So I think like it's such a foreign thing to us to understand the mental health. And I'm sure if he could talk to you again later, it would have more questions. But what are some things that like you think the general public or the general firefighting public should know to better understand mental health, or that we haven't actually like prompted to ask about? Because I know he'll wrap his head around it and he'll have more questions to ask, to follow up, to dig in deeper, and to hopefully advocate for some people getting some
We'll
help
have you
that
on
don't
the
even
show
know they
again.
need it. But what are some things that like we haven't like talked about? And it's real brief because I think he could follow up later. But what have we not talked about that you think firefighters need to know?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, like, so if we were talking about cancer, right? Why wouldn't anybody that's got a cancer diagnosis also go to a mental health counselor to learn how to deal with their
The
cancer
scariest
diagnosis,
thing ever.
right?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't that be immediately approved as a part of their workers' compensation package? To be able to, it should be a given, right? Instead of, if you want to. Like, no, go in, establish a relationship so that you have someone you can go to and your family can go to, because guess what? They're suffering too, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is the number one thing affecting everyone in the service right now is burnout. And so burnout, we can't necessarily, I can't, as a mental health professional, right? I can't give you more fire trucks. I can't give you less calls per shift, right? Like I can't do that, but I can help you deal with that, right? So that it's not affecting your job and it's not affecting your home life. So burnout is huge, right? And that's something we could monitor. And I think it's something the public needs to know, right? The more overworked and taxed you guys are, the more it's going to affect you physically, mentally, and relationally, right? And it's going to affect your job performance. So that's something we really do need to look at. And then, I would say compassion fatigue is the other thing, right? There was just a lot of studies that was done on that after COVID, and how compassion fatigue really does affect you guys, and that we do need to, take steps to try to help you guys prevent that, so that you can do your job better, right? So compassion fatigue will lead to burnout. Burnout will lead to PTSD. We know that.
Hmm.
Fascinating. We'll have you back on again. I will have way more questions now that you've given me the primer on this whole thing. Obviously, this is really important to
Thank
us.
you.
It's a
Yeah.
message. So, thanks for being on today. And do you have anything else, Ben?
Just thanks for what you do. There's certainly in what I did in my role in the union and stuff, there's not necessarily a whole lot of people lining up to say thank you. But I certainly have. You've helped me. You've helped my family. You've helped a ton of people in the fire service. So I appreciate the work you do, and hopefully that the culture of being able to go get help continues to grow. And I know you've done an awesome job on it. So thank you for what you've done for the fire service. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And we're clear.